Hello and welcome to Comic Island. My name is Arden, and this is my video on the future of Star Wars. So in the never-ending list of pointless stuff I spend way too much time thinking about, lately I've been wondering about the future of the Star Wars franchise. Now in the immediate future, we have a good idea of what's on the horizon. The Last Jedi will be coming out this year, a Han Solo movie is coming out next year, and Episode 9 will presumably be coming out in 2019. Battlefront 2 is coming out at some point in the future, and allegedly some people still play the Old Republic. The comics will no doubt be continuing their publication line under Marvel throughout all of this, and Rebels still seems to be having a strong following to it. That stuff doesn't really concern me much. We know it's on the way, we know it's happening, we've seen trailers of some of this stuff. We can speculate endlessly into that content, but what this video is about, and what I'm a little more interested in, is what happens after all of this. Is Star Wars films going to just become a regular annual thing, or are they going to wind down for a while? I have difficulty imagining that the Star Wars franchise is going anywhere anytime soon. Star Wars has made Disney the largest film studio in the world, so in all likelihood we'll be getting their films for a little while now. Video games about Star Wars have pretty much been consistently made throughout that entire industry's history, so they aren't going anywhere either. The comics are likely to continue with the same difficulties as superhero stuff has when it comes to longevity. Like, the Star Wars comics are already getting pretty high in issue number already, but they're not going to go anywhere. They might just get rebooted or into different mini-series or whatever they plan on doing with this content going forward. It'll struggle in the same way that modern comics are a struggle in finding a nice balance between continuity and keeping things available to new readers, but odds are they'll find a way, or at least attempt to. So the question kind of becomes whether or not the market bears this out. Disney's likely to try either way, but are people gonna keep coming back for more Star Wars? On the one hand, it seems inevitable that interest in Star Wars movies will wane over time, especially if this is just something Disney's going to do every year. Nothing lasts forever after all, and over time, these movies will become a bit mundane to people. The Star Wars movies are going to transition away from being a must-see attraction to people into something that's just around every December. Now, there are many factors that will determine the duration or whether or not this happens, but over time, there's no way Disney can sustain the record-breaking juggernaut streak that the Star Wars movies have been on the last 2 years. On the other hand, Disney has a long way to fall before Star Wars movies aren't making a profit anymore. And they likely could ride that out for years to come, for better or worse. Also remember, they are simultaneously defying expectations over and over again with the Marvel movies, that have become a sort of force unto themselves, and already there's at least 2 of those movies coming out every year. Not only has Marvel been doing really well at the box office, but they've proven adept at 2 major things that have helped keep the MCU afloat. First, they tend to rotate content and give each movie its own feeling to it, keeping the franchise fresh, and second, they've done a remarkably good job at maintaining a certain level of quality control. Even the worst MCU movie is just okay. None of them are all that bad, it's just some of them get a little boring. But even at their worst, I find them still entertaining enough you can sit through any one of the Marvel movies. If Star Wars can achieve that level of quality, which so far they pretty much have, then Marvel has shown just how long you can keep this sort of thing going, and it's very likely that is the goal of Disney long term when it comes to Star Wars, to make this a stable, ongoing thing. This is troubling to many, and I'm not going to pretend that it isn't a little concerning. I mean, how long can this go before it just gets old and dragged out? Or how long before Star Wars becomes so bloated and bland that we all just get kind of sick of it? From what we've seen so far of Rogue One and The Force Awakens, I'm not sure where things stand. Neither movie is perfect, but I enjoyed them well enough. My big concern is how much these movies seem to obsess over A New Hope in particular, but the original trilogy in general, and just how much it kind of cripples both movies. Force Awakens is pretty great, but I really wish they didn't have to shove in that super awesome, mega powerful, bigger, better Washington Redskins Death Star. And Rogue One suffers in its attempt to twist and turn its own story just to fit the beginning of A New Hope, which it kind of totally messes up anyways. But both movies show a lot of love for practical effects and a very authentic look and feel when it comes to Star Wars. I like a lot of these new characters. I do appreciate that both Force Awakens and Rogue One genuinely took some chances with their content. But there is one thing that they really have to work on, and that's this pandering to the original trilogy. The occasional reference and cameo is fine. Having members of the original cast pop up works for me, and I get the need to draw on similar themes and ideas from the original trilogy. But if they want to build a sustained relationship with the audience, they need to start creating icons of their own, working content forward to expand and build upon the Star Wars universe and what Star Wars movies can be. They can't all be rehashes of these 3 movies. They have to show that there's more content than a 3-act story to Star Wars. They have to prove that it's worth covering and it's worth us seeing. And I believe that's there and doable. I've heard the argument from some individuals I respect but don't always agree with, that Star Wars is limited and small in its scope. I disagree. Star Wars is pretty much just a setting, and you can literally tell any story in a setting. If Disney does this, if they can tread new ground, if they can start pushing Star Wars out to new time periods, perhaps old ones, then there's no real limit to amazing stuff they can do with this franchise. I fully believe those Star Wars comics have longevity to them, just like the superhero stuff, but much like the Star Wars movies, it has to be done right, and they have to push content outside of that original trilogy time period, or else it will get stagnant over time. And while I understand the common argument I hear from critics that Disney shouldn't be doing this and that they should be creating new worlds, honestly, there are so many fictional worlds and ideas out there. At some point I don't mind them sticking to one setting we're familiar with if they can tell these new stories. Some people are so snobby about this stuff, it really isn't that big a deal. Not if it works, not if you can tell a good creative story. I'm also mindful of the fact that there's this gradual growing tradition within my family that every year around Christmas time we all go and see the new Star Wars movie together. And on that note, that's kind of what traditions are. Just fun exercises to spend time with your family together and do something you all enjoy. If they can keep up a certain level of quality, I don't mind this being a permanent fixture in my life, that every December me and my sisters go to the movie theaters and see the latest Star Wars movie. To be honest, from that perspective, it works for me. These movies don't have to be perfect, because I get to spend time with some people I care about. The adventures of Han, Luke, and Leia are great, but their story can't sustain Star Wars forever. We'll need more. Personally, I think Disney is kind of heading in that direction anyways. The first 2 movies were a little nostalgia heavy to really get people into Star Wars again, but I don't think that's their long-term goal, or at least I hope not. The Force Awakens is pretty much about the torch being passed on to these new characters, and inevitably we are going to have to move on from all this baggage and references to the original trilogy. Personally, I'd really like to see them take a crack at some of BioWare's stuff from the Knights of the Old Republic era, if they can. How cool would Darth Revan's story be on the big screen? I also think there's other ideas they need to explore. Maybe there's more to the Force than just the dark and the light side, which are 2 extremes. I'd really like to see an Order establish a sort of middle ground, a sort of peaceful-ish Jedi that try and keep control but are willing to act emotionally and be proactive and more involved in the politics of the galaxy. That might be cool. At some point it would also be interesting to do a sort of TNG style take on the Star Wars franchise. Jump the things forward like 100 years or so from the original trilogy and start treading ground with a new mythos, a new political landscape, and a little bit of change and development in the technology and gear of the Star Wars universe. These are all just ideas, but my point is they're very potent ideas of many that are available to Disney at this time. If they want to take some real chances and go for stuff like this, then I think there's a long, wonderful future ahead of Star Wars. If, on the other hand, they just keep trying to remake the same movies, then inevitably this bubble will burst over time. I do wonder how much Disney can flood the market with tie-in material, merchandising, and Star Wars content before there is starting to be these diminished returns, but there are ways they can kind of avoid that or at least reduce it. I think if they look at Marvel and how they go about creating content, there's a long future ahead for Star Wars. That's kind of where Star Wars is at the best. When I look at Star Wars media that really treads new ground, it's great. When I look at stuff that relies on recognition and nostalgia, it gets lousy pretty fast. Anyhow, that's what's been on my mind lately. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. What would you like to see when it comes to Star Wars content in the future? I'm curious what ideas everyone has. Otherwise, thanks for watching. If you like Comic Island, please consider supporting us on our Patreon page. The link is available in the video description below, and as always, don't forget to like, subscribe, and keep reading comics.